What if one of the world's earliest civilizations could speak, but we no longer understand a single word it ever wrote? Across the vast plains of what is now modern-day Pakistan and northwestern India, an ancient culture flourished more than 4,000 years ago. It built cities with astonishing precision, engineered drainage systems that rival some modern designs, and maintained a level of urban planning that seems, even today, quietly sophisticated. And yet, from this civilization, so organized, so methodical, comes a silence that historians have never been able to break. Because the people of the Indus Valley left behind writing. Hundreds of symbols, carefully inscribed on seals, pottery, and stone, repeated patterns. Structured signs. Something unmistakably intentional. Something undeniably linguistic. And this is where the contradiction begins. We have the script. We have the symbols. We have the artifacts. But we do not have the language. So the question remains, lingering in the margins of history. What if an entire written system, once meaningful, once alive, has been lost so completely that even its basic logic is beyond our reach? This is not myth. This is stone. The civilization in question is known today as the Indus Valley Civilization, sometimes referred to as the Harappan Civilization, named after one of its first major archaeological sites, Harappa, flourishing roughly between 2600 and 1900 BCE. It extended across a region larger than ancient Egypt or Mesopotamia at their peaks. Cities such as Mohenjo-Daro reveal a level of standardization and civic organization that suggests a deeply interconnected society. For decades, historians approached this civilization with a certain expectation. Like Mesopotamia with its cuneiform, or Egypt with its hieroglyphs, it seemed only a matter of time before the Indus script would be deciphered. After all, writing systems leave patterns. They encode language. And language, in theory, can be unraveled. But here is the unsettling part. Despite over a century of study, the Indus script remains undeciphered, not partially understood, not loosely translated, completely unknown. The discovery of the script itself unfolded gradually, almost reluctantly, in the early 20th century. In the 1920s, excavations led by archaeologists such as John Marshall began to uncover the urban remains of the Indus Valley. What they found challenged prevailing assumptions about the origins of civilization in South Asia. Among the ruins were small, intricately carved seals, often made of steatite bearing animal motifs and short sequences of symbols. These symbols were not random. They appeared in consistent patterns, repeated across multiple sites, carefully arranged in linear sequences, often from right to left. At first glance, they seemed familiar. Too structured to be decorative, too repetitive to be meaningless. And so the assumption was made. This was writing. But unlike the Rosetta Stone, which provided a crucial bilingual key for Egyptian hieroglyphs, no such reference exists for the Indus script. There is no known translation, no parallel text, no bridge between the symbols and any known language. And this is where history does not break easily. But here, it bends. The script consists of approximately 400 to 600 distinct signs, depending on how variations are counted. Most inscriptions are short, typically between 4 and 10 symbols in length. The longest known sequence contains only about 26 characters. This brevity presents a fundamental challenge. Without longer texts, it becomes difficult to identify grammar, syntax, or even consistent linguistic patterns. The materials on which the script appears are equally revealing. Seals, pottery, tablets, and occasionally metal objects. Many of the seals appear to have been used for trade, possibly stamped into clay to mark goods or ownership. Others may have held administrative or symbolic significance. The symbols themselves range from abstract shapes to more pictorial forms, fish-like figures, geometric patterns, human-like representations. Some signs appear frequently, suggesting common words or grammatical markers. Others are rare, possibly indicating specific names or specialized terms. Radiocarbon dating and stratigraphic analysis place these artifacts firmly within the mature phase of the Indus Valley Civilization. There is no ambiguity about their age, no doubt about their authenticity. And yet, interpretation remains elusive. Mainstream scholarship has approached the Indus script with cautious rigor. Many researchers believe it represents a logosyllabic writing system similar in some respects to early Sumerian or Egyptian scripts, where symbols can represent both sounds and concepts. Statistical analyses have shown that the script exhibits patterns consistent with language, such as positional constraints and sign frequency distributions. But even these findings stop short of true understanding. One of the central debates revolves around the underlying language. Some scholars propose that the script encodes a Dravidian language, possibly an ancestor of modern languages like Tamil. This theory is supported by certain linguistic parallels and the geographical distribution of Dravidian languages today. Others argue for a completely different linguistic family, perhaps one that has no surviving descendants, a lost language, tied to a civilization that vanished without leaving a direct cultural lineage. And then there are those who question the very premise. A minority of researchers have suggested that the Indus symbols may not constitute a full writing system at all. Instead, they propose that the markings could represent a form of symbolic communication, proto-writing, perhaps used for ritual or identification rather than linguistic expression. But here is the tension. If the symbols are not language, why do they exhibit such structured repetition? Why do certain signs consistently appear at the beginning or end of sequences? Why do they follow patterns that resemble grammatical constraints? This is not decoration. This is not randomness. And yet, it resists translation. Attempts at decipherment have been numerous. Over the decades, scholars have applied methods ranging from comparative linguistics to computational analysis. Some have tried to align the script with known languages, searching for phonetic correspondences. Others have used statistical models to identify potential syntactic structures. None have succeeded in producing a universally accepted translation. Part of the difficulty lies in the absence of context. Without knowing what the inscriptions refer to, whether they record names, transactions, religious formulas, or something else entirely, it becomes nearly impossible to assign meaning to individual signs. Imagine finding a set of symbols with no explanation, no reference, and no cultural continuity. Imagine trying to reconstruct an entire language from fragments, no longer than a single sentence. This is the challenge of the Indus script. And this is where the silence deepens. Because the disappearance of the script coincides with the decline of the Indus Valley Civilization itself. Around 1900 BCE, urban centers began to disperse. Cities were abandoned. Trade networks weakened. The reasons remain debated: climate change, shifting river systems, economic disruption. But the result is clear. The script vanishes. There is no transitional phase, no evolution into a later writing system. It appears, fully formed, and then it disappears. This absence raises a deeper question, not just about language, but about memory. What happens when a civilization's written voice is lost? When its records, its names, its thoughts, encoded in symbols, become permanently inaccessible? We are left with structures, artifacts, and patterns, but not meaning. And meaning is where history becomes human. Modern technology has offered new avenues of investigation. Machine learning algorithms have been applied to the script, analyzing sign sequences and searching for hidden structures. Some studies suggest that the script follows rules consistent with linguistic systems, reinforcing the idea that it encodes language. But even with computational power, the core problem remains unchanged. There is no key, no bilingual inscription, no known descendant language, no definitive phonetic mapping. And so, the script endures as one of the great unresolved puzzles of ancient history. Not because it lacks evidence, but because it has too much ambiguity. Every symbol is precise, every inscription deliberate, but the system behind them remains just out of reach. And perhaps that is what makes it so compelling, because it challenges a fundamental assumption that with enough data, enough time, and enough analysis, all knowledge can be recovered. The Indus script suggests otherwise. It suggests that some systems can collapse so completely that reconstruction becomes not just difficult, but potentially impossible. And yet, the effort continues. Archaeologists still excavate new sites. Linguists still test new hypotheses. Data scientists still refine their models. Each new discovery adds another fragment to the puzzle, another possibility, another question, but no final answer. And so we return to the beginning. To the seals, the symbols, the silent inscriptions carved into stone. They are not random. They are not accidental. They were created by a civilization that understood structure, order, and communication. But whatever they once said is no longer accessible to us. History does not break easily, but here it bends. Because in the case of the Indus Valley Script, we are not looking at a missing artifact, or a damaged record, or an incomplete text. We are looking at a complete system that we cannot read. And that may be the most unsettling part of all. Not that the past is distant, but that, sometimes, it is perfectly preserved and still completely silent. And perhaps, in that silence, there is a lesson that extends beyond archaeology. Because the Indus script forces us to confront a boundary we rarely acknowledge, that preservation is not the same as understanding. That a civilization can endure in material form, its cities mapped, its tools cataloged, its symbols carefully documented, and still remain, in its essence, unknown. The markings on those seals were once immediate, obvious, understood without effort by the people who made them. They carried meaning as naturally as spoken words. And now, they exist as patterns without voice, not erased, not destroyed. Simply, unread. And that distinction matters. Because it reminds us that history is not just about what survives, it is about what can still be interpreted.